For the past 300 years, treasure hunters and archaeologists alike have been digging up what may be the most mysterious artifact in the earth. And on today's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet, I'm going to talk about that object and why we may never know what it was or used for, if anything. I'm John Paulus. You're listening to Life's Potluck Buffet only on YouTube. If you've been enjoying Life's Potluck Buffet, please subscribe. And if you've already subscribed, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And if you have a Brave browser, you can now contribute basic attention tokens to Life's Potluck Buffet with John Paulus on YouTube. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening. The object I'm talking about is this thing that's called a Roman dodecahedron. Now, what is this thing? Well, it's a 12-sided object. Dodecahedron is a Greek word for 12 faces. A dodeca is 12 in ancient Greek. Oh, dodeca is 12 in modern Greek too. But the hedron part is a word for a seat or a face or of an object or a flat surface like that. So that's why a dodecahedron is a 12-sided object. And it's a solid. So, I mean, the shape is a solid. So the faces of it are all around, and it's, you could hold it in the palm of your hand. And most of them are somewhere, they say, between the size of a golf ball and the size of, well, I saw a description that said the size of a cricket ball. I don't know how big a cricket ball is, but for judging from the pictures, let's say the size of a baseball, a little bit smaller maybe. So that's the general size. How much do they weigh? About half a pound for the bigger ones. And that is about 250 grams for those of you listening in places where the metric system is used. And the thing about the Roman ones is that these are made of a bronze, and there's these really intricate features like holes of varying sizes, although it seems like one of the holes is big, one of them is kind of smaller, and then the others are the same size. And they also have, and it's hollow, so it's not when I said solid, I meant a shape that's like three-dimensional. I didn't mean that it was like solid bronze. It's not. That would be a lot heavier than half a pound. It's more like a hollow bronze object, and it has little balls on the vertices, as they're called. So the place where the pentagons, the five-sided faces that make up the dodecahedron, meet. There at each of those there's a ball that is made of bronze, and so you can stand this object, you can have it or sit this object on any of the 5 bronze balls that are at the corners of each of the pentagons that make up the shape. And then also, so that means that there's a total of 20 vertices in a regular dodecahedron. So that means there are 20 balls on these objects. Why is the number 20 important? Listen, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole where all these numbers are really important. But there is one object that has been found in the past 300 years that is a icosahedron or icosahedron. And that is from the Greek word ikosi, and we know what hedron means, but the ikosi part is 20 in ancient Greek. So the but also modern Greek. The 20-sided ones have also been found. Well, one 20-sided one that I know of has been found. So the 12-side part isn't necessarily important, but the thing about the 20-sided one is that the big holes aren't there. The large holes that are on the faces of the 12-sided one, there are these really almost like pinhole sized holes, and there are four of them, I think, on each face. So that's a different thing. So maybe the holes aren't important at all for these objects, or maybe they're of limited use or of specific use to the ones that have holes, but the ones that don't have holes and 20 sides, maybe there's a different use. And the interesting numerical, and I'm sorry, I said I wouldn't get too into numbers, but the interesting numerical thing about this is that the number of vertices on an icosahedron is 12. So the dodecahedron has 20 vertices, the points where those balls are, and the icosahedron has 12. So that is interesting. Also, the shape that makes up the faces of the icosahedron, a regular icosahedron, is the triangle. So three-sided face, 20 of them, whereas you have 12 five-sided faces, pentagons, for the other dodecahedron objects. Which, now that I'm thinking of it, that means that when you multiply the number of sides by the number of faces, you get 60 in both cases. What does that mean? I have no idea. So we're not going to go down that path. Now, the latest of these objects was found just last year in a place called Norton Disney. And yes, you're right. There probably is a connection to what you thought. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But the Norton Disney is in, of course, our favorite county of Lincolnshire in England. And it's right near Lincoln, not Lincoln in Argentina, Lincoln in England. And yeah, okay, the Disney part of it, Walt Disney of Disney fame, the most famous Disney probably, went to Norton Disney back in the 1940s, in the late 1940s, when he was kind of on a pilgrimage to see places where his family may have come from, and he may very well be related to the Disney family that was based out of Norton Disney. And that family, where that name comes from, it's actually a French word, because it's from a place that's called Isny. Now it's Isny-sur-Mer, and it's right near where, recently we had the commemoration of the D-Day landings of the Allied forces on the beaches of Normandy in France, and the northern part of France there. And the Omaha Beach, one of the famous landing points there, is really close, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Isny-sur-Mer, which is where the Disney family is. The de part is the de of in French and other Romance languages. So Disney means from the town of Disney. And Disney is a great producer. Isny is a great producer of milk products. They're known for their caramels, and they're known for their cheeses. One of my favorite cheeses out there is Mimolette, and that is produced in the dairies of that area. So that is the background there on Norton Disney. And yes, it does have to do with Walt Disney, probably. And yes, Walt Disney did visit Norton Disney. Now, what the archaeological group that was digging at Norton Disney found was a dodecahedron, and there's some stuff around it that seems to me like mostly building materials. So this is another interesting thing about these dodecahedra, is that they don't necessarily find them near a consistent thing. If they always found them with the same stuff, the first one I believe was found with some coins. So they thought, oh, this must be a thing must be related to coins. Maybe you use the different holes to size different coins out, but that's not likely the case. So that is a thing that adds to the mystery of the dodecahedron. And another interesting thing about places where these have been found over the last 300 years, they are found in places across the broader, what was at the time when these were used, in the probably 2nd to 4th centuries CE. In that time period, the places where they're found are places where the Roman Empire had expanded to in what is modern-day Europe and the United Kingdom, and yet none are found in on the Italian peninsula. So there's no evidence that these are things that exist in what today we call Italy, but what was a really central place for the Roman Empire at that time. Now, the thing about that is, my guess is that probably means that these are strongly associated with the Roman legions, the armies that are set up in all of these various places and are living and stationed, so to speak, in these places. Because if you look at a map of where Roman legions are located and you look at a map of the finds of these things, then there's you could see what's going on here. Now, because these places are like places in the United Kingdom and Belgium and Switzerland and Austria and Hungary and in all sorts of places, France, the fact that these are places where the weather can be colder, there's this whole kind of interesting but not accurate assumption that these had something to do with colder weather work. So for example, you'll see a lot of videos on YouTube, people like knitting gloves using them as a knitting technology, which is unlikely, but nonetheless, you can see videos, they're very creative, where people kind of try to use these, use 3D printed models of these dodecahedra to knit gloves. Now, before you say, well, that maybe that's it, odds are there wasn't a lot of knitting going on of this type in that period. So, in fact, for many centuries later. So the idea that these are knit gloves doesn't seem likely. But also the idea that these are only found in cold weather places is also not true, because there's some that have been found in the kind of real south of France, and the climate there is enough like the climate anywhere else on the Italian peninsula, in similar places, that you would probably find people using these there to make their gloves. So it doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense when you start to put the pieces together, and that is probably not a use of it. Now, the question is, was this a toy? Because we've seen, and those of you who are big fans of 12-sided dies and maybe even 20-sided dies, you say, oh, well, 12 sides, 20 sides, maybe these things were rolled. Now, they're kind of heavy, they're half a pound, but also they seem to not roll very well. They tend to, apparently, from something I read, someone who's tried to roll these, they tend to end up on the same side often, or they're just not very good for that per se, like rolling on the ground or table, like in close range. In terms of throwing them a long way, maybe it's some sort of tossing game. Who knows? But There are 20-sided and 12-sided, what we would call dies, made in the ancient world and found in areas that also were in contact with the Roman Empire. And these are often made out of lighter weight materials. So, for example, in Egypt, we have some 20-sided dies that are made of faience, which is a kind of, let's just say it's glass before it becomes the glass that you know in your cabinets in your kitchen. So that faience is, easy material to roll. They're also, it's like, not, these have, in this case, these have letters on each side, or some of them have the name of gods on each side. So the question is like, were those used for divination, right? You roll the ones with the gods' names on it, and maybe you ask that particular deity or demand from that deity some help. So that could have been the case. But that is that means that these don't really look like the game version of anything that we know about. Was it used for anything to do with astronomy or calendrical stuff? There are a lot of websites on it. There's a rabbit hole of its own. Probably not. They're too differing in sizes to really make sense as measuring devices. So that rules out a lot of the guesses about them in terms of measuring devices. I've seen people say that they were early stress balls. Because they're hand shaped, and boy, I guess there's a lot of stress when you're in the Roman army, but I don't know. And also, this is not necessarily there. These have been found in places where they might not have been used by a Roman legionnaire. There are grave sites where they've been found. There's one gravesite of a woman where they found one. So let's just put that aside as well, because let's not get into the ritual object discussion, because that's not a satisfactory answer. Oh, also, I'm just gonna rule out candle holder. That's one of the ones that I saw, and I'm ruling this out right now because there was some wax found in one, or a little bit of residue of wax, and given that these are bronze objects, they are produced using probably a lost wax method, which maybe I'll explain one day, but nonetheless, it involves filling a cast with wax that gets melted by the bronze when you pour it in. So, who knows? Maybe just in the process, there's a little bit of wax left over from the cast that didn't melt or whatever, and we found a trace of it. So and wax is very common in bronze working shops as well. So there's some wax could have gotten on it. Maybe they put it next to the wax and things happen. But it does not mean the idea that this is a candle holder is also equally impossible. So we will rule that out as well. But what is the 12-sided object known as the Roman dodecahedron? Well, as you heard, we have no earthly idea. I like to think that whole thing with the numbers that I came up with might be a lead, but then we get stuck into that kind of calendrical measurement thing, because we've got 12 and we've got 60 and 20. Also, the coin, that brings us back to the coin thing with the numbers and things like that. I don't think they were probably counting how many balls were on each of these or how many sides, or, these are not, I don't think these are calculators of any time. Believe me, I tried, and I don't know what on earth you would be calculating using these. So let's leave that out. They are very extremely well made and really nice objects. So they're thought to be of great value, which is why we find them in places in general that are either near valuables or, trash in one case. So maybe sometimes they're not valuable, but nonetheless, they're really nicely made objects. That's for sure. And that makes us think that these weren't just like necessarily everywhere, although we've found at this point 130 or more of them, which means that they're pretty common. If you could find 130 of anything, then around what is now today Europe and the United Kingdom, you can probably say that it was fairly common. If these 130 things were from, oh, I don't know, 1800 years ago, that's probably that. Yeah. So even though they're nicely made, they were also not uncommon. So that adds to the mystery, I think. It's kind of nice to have mysteries in life, isn't it? Well, let's ask the cards what they think about all of this, and we'll use them for divination purposes to see what our question for the day is. Yellow lemons, blue dumplings, magenta noodles. Cards, tell us something. Oh, it would be really cool if this was card 12 or 20. There's no card 60, so it's not going to be that. All right, here we go. Oh, it's card 19. Oh, one off. It's only desperation if you have no actual strategy. Always act in line with an empowered plan that advances your progress towards your goals. The same action can often be viewed as either desperate or strategic, depending on whether it's part of a plan or not. So think about a decision you're making right now. What is the desperate thing to do? And then what is the empowered thing to do? And then guess what? Do the empowered thing and just put the desperate one aside for another day. I'll see you tomorrow on Life's Potluck Buffet.